Hi, everyone. Today we have Brooke Jones. She is a former Los Angeles and San Francisco radio personality and comedian. She is a screenwriter and published author. She is a mother, breast cancer warrior, and dog mom too. She is here today to discuss the undeniable proof that her story really happened. And it's all in her book, Why Are There Monkeys and Other Questions for God? Hi, Brooke. Could you tell us about your journey? And thank you for being here.
Thank you so much for inviting me. And this is the book, Why Are There Monkeys and Other Questions for God? And I was very lucky that in late July of this year, it was #1 on Amazon's bestseller list in the short biography memoir category, because it takes less than 2 hours to read the whole thing, because it's not a very long book. But I have now learned that my story, which involves me being dead for 8 minutes, legally dead, actually happened. And I was given undeniable proof that it actually happened. And apparently, from those in the know, my near-death experience is the most unusual experience that's ever been reported, because most near-death experiences aren't funny. Mine is laugh out loud funny. And I would love to tell you about it. And I would also love to tell you right up front that I want everybody watching to buy this book, because 2 reasons. #1, as a breast cancer warrior, I donate a significant portion of every sale of this book to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. #2, because I believe, and as a lot of my readers also believe, this book could actually change the world. People who were born and raised to believe that their religion and their God is the only religion and the only God, and people who believe differently deserve scorn, ridicule, and maybe the fires of hell. After reading my book, Why Are the Monkeys and Other Questions for God, at this point, I've lost count of how many people have written to tell me that they were raised to believe that their religion was the only religion and everybody else is a blasphemer and heretic. And that after reading my book, they are now finding it very difficult to deny their kinship with people of other religions and other cultures. Can you imagine what this world would be like if enough of those people read this book? This hate-filled world we live in which in the name of God has been used to justify countless slaughter and war and hatred and cruelty. And if enough people read this book and feel the way so many have after reading it, this world could be, instead of a world filled with hate, a world filled with tolerance. And I personally can't think of a better way to spend the rest of my life than doing everything I can to get the entire world to know about the existence of this book. So that's what I'm doing, and that's why I'm here. And I would be only too happy to tell you my truly bizarre story. And for those who want more, I do have a website, and on that website, you will see a short video called Her Story, which is the story of my long career in radio and political satire and my battle with breast cancer, and basically the story of my life. Plus, there's a trailer for my book, which is like a movie trailer, but it's a trailer for a book, and a brief audio sample. You'll hear me reading some of my book to you. So you can go to my website, which is written by BrookeJones.com, all one word, and Brooke has an E on the end of it. I'm very attached to my E. So now I'm going to tell you my story. Once upon a time, no, that's probably not right. I am a child of the 60s. I was a card carrying flower child hippie. And for most of us, drugs were the motivating force of our lives. I'm definitely one of those. I had a party one night, a small party, when I was 25 years old. I did something very, very stupid, and I overdosed. And I was legally dead for 8 minutes. Now, this was in 1975. I had never heard the term near-death experience. I think Raymond Moody he's the father of the near-death experience. I think he had published his book shortly before my experience, but I had certainly never heard of it. And I had never heard of tunnels and white light and all of those things that are now iconic parts of the near-death experience stories. So I had no way to understand what was happening to me. And because at the time I died, I didn't even believe in God, I found it all the more peculiar that I suddenly found myself floating in a tunnel, although floating isn't really the right word because it felt like the tunnel was literally carrying me. And it was a tunnel made of light, but not the kind of light we're accustomed to. And it felt like it was breathing. And it carried me. And then the next thing I knew, I was standing up. And I know I was standing up. And I looked around and I didn't see anything. And I don't mean I didn't see anything interesting. I mean, there was nothing. I was standing somewhere. I couldn't even tell what I was standing on because I couldn't see anything below me. There was I want to say fog, but keep in mind that discussing ethereal things with human language is like, built-in failure because there really aren't adequate words to describe any of this. But it felt like there was sort of a fog around me, although it didn't feel like a fog and it didn't feel wet, but it was this misty sort of, I don't know, sci-fi-ish strange thing with this radiating, illuminating light force. And that was all that I could see. And I called out and I said, hello, hello, hello. Will somebody tell me where I am? Where the hell am I? And that's when I heard the voice. And it was the deepest, most mellifluous voice I had ever heard. It made Darth Vader sound like Mickey Mouse. And it said, watch your language, remember where you are. And snarky me, 25-year-old snarky me, said to the voice that I couldn't see the owner of, well, I would love to, but since I have no idea where I am, it would be a little hard for me to remember where I am. So would you mind telling me where I am? And the voice said, you're at my front door. A lot of that went on for a while with the answer being, you're at my front door, and I'm confused. And the voice said, yeah, most are when they first arrive at my front door. And boom, there we were again at a front door, but I didn't see a door. So, a little confusing. And then all of a sudden it hit me. It just 2x4 upside my head. I understood I was dead. I was standing outside the front door of heaven. I couldn't see a door, but that didn't matter. And I was having a conversation with the disembodied voice of God. As I say in my book, I would have dropped dead out of absolute shock, but the fact that I was already dead would have made that pretty redundant. So I said, may I ask some questions? And the voice said, of course. And I then went on to have a question and answer session with God. And I asked every question I could think of. And God provided the answers. I asked, are you male or female? He said, why does everybody ask me that? I said, why are you asking me? I don't know. And he said, I am spirit. As most people realize or recognize at this point, God exists in spirit and does not have a body. And he said, I exist in spirit and I have no body. But if I were to show myself to you, it could be overwhelming and I don't want to cause you any harm. And I said, harm? Hello, remember me, I'm dead. Harm is pretty much a moot point. But no, I'm not going to show myself to you. And he said, I am, as for gender, I am neither male nor female. And then I heard a second voice. And it was the most decidedly feminine voice I have ever heard. And she said, and then again, I'm both. Oh my God. God is a hermaphrodite. Oh, to be a fly on the wall when Pat Robertson hears this. We went on from there and I asked about religion and evolution and sin and prayer and forgiveness and the devil and every single question I could think of. And very early on in the situation, I wondered why I wasn't absolutely terrified. Why wasn't I rolled up in a ball and shaking? And I didn't know the answer to that at first. And then it occurred to me, I was having a conversation with the creator of the universe. Why would he want to frighten me? If he, and I use the word he, please understand, because it's a lot easier than saying he, she, they, them, both, neither. So I just use the word he, but we're not talking about a he, okay? You're with me now. I was not frightened because God, as the Father of everything and the Father of all of us, as any father would do, wanted to make his child feel comfortable. Why would he want to scare me? He's a loving father. That's the reason why I realized finally that I wasn't frightened, because he made sure that I wasn't frightened. I mean, if Robin Williams or Mr. Rogers can adopt the persona of a kind, loving, and yes, humorous father, certainly God can do that, can't he? Of course he can. And he did. And people ask me, why do you think God was funny? God isn't a stand-up comedian. And there have been people who have written to me saying, oh, this can't be true because, I know God and God's not funny. Really? That's interesting. And what I tell people is my belief is that I was not frightened for the same reason that God presented himself to me with a sense of humor, because I am by nature a comedian. I respond to comedy, and God, I couldn't meet him on his level, so he met me on mine. And he presented himself in a form, in a way that I not only felt comfortable with, but that I could relate to. And why would God not do that? It just seems obvious to me. And as for, oh, it couldn't be real because God isn't funny. Hello, have you ever seen a platypus? Obviously, the creator of the world has a sense of humor. And if you doubt it, you're just not paying attention. So I was dead legally here on Earth for 8 minutes, but A, I wasn't on Earth, and B, in that other realm, in that place, time doesn't exist. So it was 8 minutes here on Earth. It could have been an eternity or a half a second in heaven, I don't know, but it was time enough for me to ask every question I could think of and receive the answers. Some of those answers, people will say, well, of course God said that. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And other answers that they read in my book, because my book is a word for word account of that question and answer session with God. And some of those questions people find surprising, but I'm not surprised by that. People are going to be very surprised when they have their moment and when they meet God, because inevitably the God they're going to meet is not the God they're expecting, because the God that they're going to meet is going to be so comfortable, so familiar to them that they will have a hard time believing that it's real. But that's who he is, and he couldn't possibly be anything other than that if he in fact created everything that exists. We talked about evolution and creation, and that's where the name of the book came from. Why are there monkeys? And other questions for God. I have always wondered, because the Charles Darwin theory of evolution postulates that the human race evolved from monkeys. Well, if that is actually the case, why are there still monkeys? Well, they should have all turned into people by now, shouldn't they? So yes, I asked God that very question, and he laughed. And he said that he asked Charles Darwin that very question when Darwin arrived. And I said, well, what was Charles Darwin's answer? And God laughed. And yes, God does laugh. He said, Charles Darwin's answer was, and I quote, "Why do you think I called it a theory?" But evolution and creation, people will tell you that it must be one or the other, but that doesn't even make sense scientifically, much less religiously. We'll forget about religion for the moment. Science tells you that can't be true, because as God explained to me, and as my own experience in life proves to me, everything that was created evolves. Everything that evolves was created. And to give me an exact microcosmic view of that bigger picture, God said, consider, if you will, your birth. You were a fetus, and before that there was a sperm, there was an egg, they got together, they created an embryo, that embryo grew to a baby, that baby was born, that baby grew to be a toddler and a child and a teenager and a grown-up, and that's evolution and creation. And that is true of absolutely everything you see, touch, hear, or recognize. Every single thing on this planet, everything in the cosmos was created, because nothing comes from nothing. That's science. That's the law of physics. And physics also postulates that that which does not grow, evolve, dies. Evolution is a part of the life cycle, an integral part of the life cycle. So yes, creation and evolution, they are not mutually exclusive. They are both facts of life. I asked questions that some people find peculiar, some people think are odd, but I spent years talking to friends late at night when I probably should have been studying for exams. We would sit around and say, for example, if you could talk to God, what would you say? If you could ask God anything, what would you ask? And we used to have those conversations all the time. So I had like a trunk full of those questions sitting somewhere in the back of my head. And suddenly there I was in front of the ultimate answer man. I just opened the trunk and the questions came flying out of me. And at some point, instead of asking who killed John Kennedy, or how do dolphins keep from drowning when they sleep, or why is there a North Pole and a South Pole when in outer space there is no North or South? Instead of those questions, which, you know, I've always really wanted to know the answer to, suddenly I was in a place in front of a being that was going to give me some answers that were, to me, a bit more important. So I put all those questions aside. And when I came back, I didn't know who killed John Kennedy, or I didn't know why dolphins don't drown when they sleep, but I knew a bunch of other things. I don't know if the final question that I asked was the reason that I was returned. I do know that the final question that I asked was a question that had never occurred to me in my entire life and was so uncharacteristic of me and my life to that point that when it came out of my mouth, I was shocked. But in that moment, when I realized I was only going to get to ask one more question, I realized that there was only one more question that I wanted to ask, in fact, that I needed to ask. And it was indeed a question that had never even crossed my mind. And no, I will not tell you what it is because it's in the book, but it is so startling that in order to really appreciate it, you've got to read what came before it to really get hit between the eyes by just how startling it is. And keep in mind that this book takes less than 2 hours to read. It's short. I did not return with a mission from God. I think Jake and Elwood Blues, the Blues Brothers, they had a mission from God. I think I came back with a divine responsibility as opposed to a mission from God. And it took me a long time to recognize that divine responsibility. In fact, it took me a long time to figure out how to live with the experience that I had had and to figure out how to integrate that into my life. I, at first, did not know if it had really happened, and I therefore wasn't about to talk to anybody about it because I was a journalist and I wasn't going to bring up something this bizarre if I couldn't prove that it had happened. But 4 months later, I received undeniable proof. And I mean really undeniable proof that my experience had really happened. And in that moment, I grabbed a notebook and I sat down and I wrote every word for word, every word of my experience. And I put it down. And then I said, okay, now what am I going to do? Because the life I lived before is definitely not in harmony with what I have experienced and what I learned. And what I did before doesn't feel right to me anymore. So I spent years learning how to live in harmony with my divine experience. When I asked God about religion, I said basically, you know, there's Judaism and Christianity and Catholicism and Islam and Hindu and Druids, and which religion is the religion? And God said, none. And I said, well, okay, which religion are you? And God said, I am no religion. Okay, watch out, Pat Robertson. Take your heart medicine, buddy. God then said to me, religion is a man-made concept created by men for the sole purpose of controlling other men. And it has nothing to do with a man's relationship with me being God, because it was God who was saying this. And I said, did you just say that religion has nothing to do with God? And he said, yeah, that's exactly what I said. And that's exactly what I meant. And I said, well, then if somebody sends up a prayer to Yahweh, and somebody sends up a prayer to Jesus, and somebody sends up a prayer to Allah, and somebody sends up a prayer to their ancestors, and whatever. He said, I'm the one that gets those prayers because I'm the only one who's here. I said, are you listening? Do you hear all prayers? He said, oh, absolutely. And I said, well, then why don't you answer all prayers? And he said, what makes you think I don't? I said, well, Okay, I'll give you an example. The time I was 5 until the time I was maybe 9, every single night, I did the same thing before I got into bed. I brushed my teeth, I put on my pajamas, I knelt beside my bed, and I said the following. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. And by the way, God, please give me a pony. And I jumped into bed. And I woke up the next morning and I looked around. I looked under the bed. I looked, no pony. Finally, one morning when I was 8 or 9, I don't know, I looked around. I got out of bed. I looked under the bed. I opened the closet. I looked in the closet. No pony. So I concluded, obviously, there is no God because I'm a good girl. If there were a God, there would be a pony. So, okay, God, I'm still pissed about the pony. How come I didn't get one? We had a long talk about this, and it involved prayer and a bunch of other things. But then he made a point of saying sometimes the answer to a prayer sounds like a prayer unanswered. I am not a genie. I am not Santa Claus. This is all God talking. And just because people ask me for something does not mean that it is what is best for them, because people sometimes have a hard time knowing the difference between what they need and what they want. If they ask for something that I know will not ultimately be good for them, then I am helping them by not giving them what they have asked for. If they translate that as me not answering their prayer, they're not actually paying attention. So much for my pony. And then I realized, well, where was I going to put the pony? I owned a rabbit fur mini skirt when I was 16. If I had had a pony, if he had been in the closet, he would have eaten my rabbit fur mini skirt and probably pooped on my cheerleader pom-pom. So, you know, it's just as well that he didn't give me a pony. But I learned things that absolutely changed my life. And once it was proven to me that it had happened, and I wrote it all down word for word, I then spent a long time learning how to live in harmony with the lessons I had learned. I started by hanging out with some people I knew who were in radio in San Francisco. I was living in San Francisco at the time. And these were people who were Christian, big C, not little c. Well, big C and little c. These were people who walked the walk. These were people who were actually followers of a teacher named Jesus. They weren't people who said, oh, you're going to hell and you're going, that's not who they were. These were people who were really righteous and whose lives were in harmony with the lessons that I had learned. So I started hanging out with them. They did go to a church, so I started going to that church and hanging around, and we would do Bible studies and we would talk about God's intention and the history in the Bible and all of this. And one day I was walking through my living room, the television was on, and Pat Robertson just happened to be on the television, and he said something that made me stop in my tracks. And I sat down and I listened, and he was basically saying, I can give you everything you want, and I can guarantee you will go to heaven. Just write a check and make it out to Pat Robertson and the, Christian Broadcasting, whatever, blah, 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 blah. And the church of give me all your money is what I represent. And I said, wait a minute, that has nothing to do with God. This man is a con artist. Then I started paying attention to other TV evangelists and realized they were all con men. They all preached the church of give me all your money. And I said, okay, that's it. I'm done with all organized religion because I can't find one out there that is in harmony with the lessons that I learned. So that was the end of me and church. Even though I had made a point of arranging to have myself baptized on Easter Sunday, 1976, in the Pacific Ocean. That was quite a moment. But all of these TV evangelists taught me that organized religion is a sham, and that You do not need an intercessor. You do not need a saint. You do not need a priest. You do not need a pastor. You do not need a rabbi to confer with God or to have a relationship with God. In fact, the less you have between you and God, the closer your relationship with God is going to be, which is, oddly enough, the reason why I've decided not to do an audio book of Why Are There Monkeys and Other Questions for God, because I was in pre-production for the audiobook and I got a slew of emails virtually on the same day from readers who said, while they were reading this book, they could actually feel God speaking the words on the page. And I suddenly realized that if I did an audiobook and I did the voice of God, then I would be getting in the way of that reader to God connection. And I don't want to do that. So that's why there is no audiobook and there won't be an audiobook, because I want people to look at the page and then feel whatever it is they're going to feel when they read the words, because these are not my words. I mean, the words that I spoke are in there, but the words attributed to God, I did not write. God wrote them. I have had no fewer than 7 experiences in my life for which there is no earthly explanation for my survival. I wrote an article about it, and you can find it if you go to my website and then click on my blog, What If? The article's called Death Be Not. And in it, I say that I have experienced no fewer than 7 situations that absolutely should have rendered me well and truly permanently dead, not the kind of dead you can come back from. And there's no explanation for it, other than either I am a green-eyed cat who's now living the 7th of her 9 allotted lives, or I'm a creature from a galaxy far, far away, or I have literally had an angel on my shoulder since the day I was born. I don't know which of those it is, but when I came back and I realized that I had a divine responsibility to share this experience with the world, I suddenly believed that I have, in fact, had an angel on my shoulder all my life, because I was supposed to have this experience. I was supposed to write it down, and I was supposed to do everything I can to get as many people in the world to know about it as possible. 20 years after I received undeniable proof that this had happened, I had one of those experiences for which there is no earthly explanation why I survived. I know you thought I was off topic here, but no, they're all connected, trust me. It's one of the stories that I include in this article called Death Be Not. I don't tell you about all 7 of them, I tell you about 3 of them. The one that happened in December of 1996 involved me doing Christmas shopping just before Christmas in the Pasadena Mall. And just before that, I had had an accident and I had hurt my back really badly and I couldn't walk without a cane. So there I was at the Pasadena Mall, maybe a week before Christmas, walking with my cane in one hand and my big purse in the other hand, and it had a whole bunch of little gifts in it. I was just finishing my Christmas shopping and I got into an elevator to go down one flight of stairs to the parking garage, and the elevator was empty. And just as the doors were about to close, a hand shoved into the middle and the doors opened, and these 2 gangbangers jumped into the elevator. I swear to God, it looked like there was a neon sign on their foreheads that said, "You are so screwed." God. They didn't say anything, but the angel on my shoulder made a voice in my head scream at me, "Get out." I picked up my cane, I shoved it between the doors of the elevator, and they were this far away from being closed. And the doors opened and I hobbled out of the elevator, and I heard the 2 guys laughing. I hobbled down a flight of stairs to the parking garage where a uniformed security guard took one look at me and said, "Are you all right?" And I said, "No." And I was shaking from head to foot. And I told him about the two guys in the elevator and what I was sure had almost happened. He grabbed his walkie-talkie, he made an emergency call, and then he said, "Lady, you have no idea how lucky you are. Last week, a woman about your age was murdered in that elevator. We found her body in a dumpster and her throat had been slashed. And the two guys who did it matched the description of the guys in that elevator with you." I went home. I was shaking from head to foot. And suddenly my divine experience was right in front of my face. I grabbed my typewriter, closed my eyes. I type 100 words a minute. I closed my eyes and I typed the exact word for word transcript of my divine experience. And then I got the notebook that 20 years earlier I had written it all down on. And I compared the two. And they were word for word identical. And that's when I realized that I have a divine responsibility. I have to put this in a book and I have to tell the world about it. And that's what I did. And it was published this past February. And I have dedicated whatever time remains to me in this life to telling everybody in the world about this book. Because I believe, as do a lot of people who have read it, that if enough people read this book, it could change the world. So that's why I'm here today. And that's all I'm doing right now. I mean, literally all I'm doing is giving interviews and telling people about why are there monkeys and other questions for God, and asking people to read it. And I am now hearing from a lot of people who are saying, "I'm giving a copy of this book to everybody on my holiday gift list this year," which I think is a pretty cool idea. I can't think of a better gift to give anybody. I intentionally make it not expensive. It's available online and in bookstores. You can order it from bookstores. You can order it from that online place whose name I won't say, but it rhymes with Cramazon, or Barnes and Noble, or whatever. You can order it online. You can order it from a bookstore in ebook, in paperback, or in hardcover. And I have intentionally made the price as low as possible because I want people to read this. I want millions of people to read this because I believe that this hate-filled world could be changed and turned into a world of tolerance when people read what God had to say. That's my story.
Beautiful. Thank you, Brooke. As you were talking, I ordered two. So they're for me and they're for gifts. Thank you so much. There you are right there.
Thank you. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I have so many questions. First, I wanted to ask, how can people get in touch with you? I'll let people know how they can get in touch with me. The reason I do these interviews is really to help people with their wondering about the mystery of life, wondering what their purpose is. Mostly it's related to anxiety. As a hypnotherapist, that's what I help people with, which can manifest in so many ways. It could be test taking, weight loss, smoking, can't get up in the morning, not getting along with your neighbors, your siblings, your parents. There's so much confusion and stress in the world. It can cause a lot of anxiety. So that's why I help people. That's what I help them with. And that's why I do these interviews, to give what you're giving, a little key, a little secret to what life is really about. So my email is growthfactor.org@gmail.com. And I'd love to know, how can you help people? How can they reach you? We know your book is everywhere, but if you have, maybe say your website again, or email, phone number, anything like that, and how you help people. And then I have some more questions. Thanks, Brooke.
Okay, no problem. My website is writtenbybrookejones.com, and Brooke is Brooke, and that's all one word. And on my website, you will see a video called Her Story, which will amuse you and give you background about my career in radio and comedy. It will connect you with my blog, What If. It will connect you with my political satire memes, which I post at a site I created called Camp Meme a Day. And it's a Facebook thing. My card store, I also create greeting cards. I've been doing this for, oh gosh, I don't know, 15 years maybe. The Card Outlet, which is a store through Zazzle, the online store Zazzle. So zazzle.com/the card outlet, all one word. And as with my book, I donate a portion of every sale of my cards to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. And my cards are probably the most twisted greeting cards you've ever seen, but they cover every subject you could possibly imagine. And there are sweet cards and heartwarming cards and tender cards and decidedly snarky cards and hilariously funny cards. And they're cute and they're fun, and the money goes to the Breast Cancer Research Foundation. But if you go to my website, you find connections to all of this, as well as to my YouTube site, where I post the talking memes that I started creating a while ago, specifically for my book, Why Are There Monkeys? And I created this ongoing series of talking monkeys, and it's on my website in a menu. You hit the drop down menu and there's a section called Monkey Business. And if you go to Monkey Business, you'll see my talking monkey memes, and you can click to get to my YouTube site where all of my monkey memes are, and they're goofy and silly and funny. And but you can also contact me through my website. At the bottom of each page, there is a contact form, and you can just fill out that form and click and it will send it to me. Or you can email me directly at info@writtenbybrookjones.com. And I do answer my emails. They might take me a little while because I'm getting sort of a bunch of them, but feel free to send me questions or comments or anything at info@writtenbybrookjones.com. And my website will amuse you. I promise it will. So now you know how to contact me and how to find out everything you could possibly want to know about me. Probably more than is good for you, but that's where you go to find it. And there you have it.
Very good, Brooke. Wonderful. My other question is, where were you in this world for the 8 minutes, but also in, who was surrounding you? Where were you in this world? And in the next world, what did it look like? Colors, structures, anything like that?
I was in my apartment in Palo Alto. I was with two people. I had just moved into the apartment. There was no telephone, no television, no nothing. I think there was a couch and a bed, and that was it. So when I died, first of all, it was drug related, and the people didn't really want to call the police, and I don't blame them, but there was no phone, and this was before the days of cell phones. When I died and was carried in this ethereal gossamer tunnel of light, and transported to the front door of heaven, I guess. At least that's what I was told. You're at my front door. There was nothing. I could see absolutely nothing. No people, no structures, no floor below me, no walls around me, no door in front of me. There was nothing. It was just me and the voice of God. And I don't know why I was standing up, because I was standing up. I knew I was standing up, but I couldn't see what I was standing on because there was nothing there. So it was, what do you expect? It was heaven. It was God. It was, anything is possible. So there I was, confronted by the voice of God in a place I'd never been before, in a place that I could not begin to describe because it bore no relation to anything I had ever seen in this life. And I just had to trust that, okay, I'm standing because I'm not falling. And when I was given proof that it had really happened, I stopped asking questions like, what was I standing on and why wasn't I terrified and all that, because it all made sense to me. It was God, and God can do anything he wants. And if I'm going to be standing on nothing, then I'm standing on nothing because I was with God, and with God, anything is possible. So my physical body was in Palo Alto. My spiritual body was at the front door of heaven. And that's one of the many things that I did talk to God about the meaning of soul, and are there ghosts, and what happens when we die. And all of those subjects were definitely raised and answered. And many of those answers are going to really surprise some people, but it's also going to comfort a lot of people. I've received emails from a lot of baby boomers who know that they are now living the, quote unquote, final chapter of their lives. And they spend a lot of time really being concerned with the Peggy Lee song. Is that all there is? Is this it? And I'm going to stop breathing one day and then I'm just dirt in the ground? I mean, really? Or is there some judgment that's going to befall me on the other side? And I don't know, and I really want to know. And these people have sent me emails. Dozens and dozens of these people have sent me emails going, after they read my book, their fear of what awaited them on the other side vanished. I've gotten emails from caregivers of terminally ill patients who have told me that before they read my book to their patients were just, they wanted to die already. They had no hope. They knew they weren't going to get better. And they were terrified of what awaited them, but they didn't see any point in continuing to live because it was horrible. And they were living these hopeless, desperate lives. And their caregivers read this book to them. And after doing so, these people are no longer living hopeless lives. They're now living lives that are actually full of joy. At least that's what they're telling me, because now they know that there will be an end time for them. They will stop breathing in this life, but there is another life waiting for them. And there is. And to think otherwise defies the basic laws of physics. Now, just one more subject and then I'll stop. The laws of physics tell you that nothing comes from nothing, that energy cannot be destroyed, that if you were to look at your hand, and I ask people during interviews, just look at your hand. Come on, pick up your hand, look at it. There you go. Okay, you see your hand. It's not moving, is it? It's not moving. Okay, the desk in front of you, it's not moving. It's just sitting there. The light in front of you, it's not moving. The computer, it's not moving. It's sitting right there. The hand, it's not moving. Well, yeah, they're all moving because they're all made of atoms. Everything you see is made of atoms, and atoms are made of neutrons, protons, and electrons, and none of them stand still. They all move. That's what energy is. It's the vibration. It's the frequency of the movement of the atoms in absolutely everything. And that energy cannot be destroyed. So when we stop breathing here, where does that energy go? Because it can't be destroyed. Well, the answer is it continues. It just takes another form. Because while energy cannot be destroyed, it can be transformed. It can change structure and shape, but it doesn't die. And we are energy. We are made of energy, and the energy that is us cannot die. It's a physical impossibility. The fact that we don't understand it doesn't mean it isn't real. There's a lot of things we don't understand. And if reality was only built on what we understand, this world would be a very different place. Fortunately for us, reality is not dependent on what you believe or what I believe, because reality is real whether you believe it or not. There is no death. There is transformation. There is evolution. There is change, but there is no death. And the people who have read this book and have responded to me, it has changed their lives. It has taken the fear of what's coming away from them. It has taken the belief that their God is the only God away from them. And it has changed lives. And that's what I'm hoping will happen to people all over the world. And so I would ask anybody watching this to, if you use an e-reader, you can pick up the ebook for, I don't know, $2.99, I think. Read it. And then if you are as touched by it as so many people have been, give a copy to the people you love this holiday season, and you will be helping to change the world. And if you can think of something better to do with your time, please let me know, because I don't think there's anything you could do that's better than making this world a better, kinder place. Written by BrookeJones.com. And why are there monkeys? And other questions for God. And so thank you, Melissa. Thank you for letting me be here. This was fun.
Thank
And
you for being here.
If you have more questions, go ahead.
I do. So anyone who wants to go have their dinner, breakfast, or lunch, they can go on. But I sure have more questions. And I think your story is so fascinating. I love your passion, especially that it's in a book so we all can access it. And I'm excited to get my book. Like I said, I just ordered 2. So I'm going to read it and then give it to 2 friends and hopefully family too.
Thank
So
you. Thank you.
people are going to say that you hallucinated. They say that about everyone who shares stories like yours, not just because yours was drug related. And that's a good reminder. If people look down, you'll see a word growth factor. That's my channel name and my business name as a hypnotherapist. If you click there, you'll see other interviews, and you'll notice in the comments, and I'm sure Brooke might get this too, people say, oh, she hallucinated. So how do you know that this was real?
Because I was given undeniable proof. And there is no way for me to explain that to you here. And I will be the first to tell you that when I watch an interview with an author and the author gets asked a question and the answer from the author is, oh, well, you have to read my book to get the answer. I really resent that. But sorry, folks, you have to read my book. And the reason is because there is no way for me to encapsulate the story of the undeniable proof that I was given here in this interview. You have to see the entire picture. And when you do, I promise you will agree. You will understand why I say I was given undeniable proof, and it's in the book. But there's really no way for me to explain it because it's just too long a story and too involved. But I didn't believe it. I mean, I'm a journalist. I didn't believe it, which is why I didn't tell anybody about it until I received this proof that showed me that, yep, it's absolutely exactly what happened. As strange as it is, as unbelievable as people might find it, fine. But if you tell me that you know that things that you believe are not real because you believe they're not real, and you can never be caused to question that, then I'll tell you, you're nuts. You got to admit, there are things you thought a year ago, a week ago, a decade ago that you would have sworn were the gospel truth that now you know, not true. Well, open your mind, folks. There are things you know nothing about, but that you can learn about. And just because you don't think it's possible doesn't mean it's not possible. And if you think that God isn't capable of doing anything God wants, then you don't have an understanding of who and what God is. Just because it doesn't conform to your mindset or your definition doesn't mean that that's the only possibility.
Brooke, were there questions? You had a lot of questions in the other realm. Did you come back with knowing you had questions, but you were made to forget? Or do you feel you came back with all the answers to the questions you had?
I got answers to the questions that I asked. I do not know if I might have stayed longer. I might have asked more questions. I just know that I was allotted the time I was allotted. And in that time, I asked every question that came to me in that situation. And I came back with an understanding unlike any understanding I had ever had before. I don't know. Maybe if I had been there longer, I might have asked more questions, but I do know that I was there long enough to get answers to every question that I asked. And I'm pretty sure that I asked the questions that I considered the most essential, the most relevant, the ones that had the most meaning for me.
When you were gone for 8 minutes, you came back. And when you came back, did you have to go to the hospital? Did you have any damage? How did you come back? Did you just take a deep breath, or what was that like?
Oh yeah, I took a deep breath and looked around, but then I know that I was breathing while I was there. I talk about it in the book and I say, oh, wow, I took a deep breath, and realizing that breathing was a kind of a weird thing for a dead girl to be doing. I took another one. And yes, I had a body and I was breathing and I could see things and stuff. But when I returned, I suddenly took a deep breath and looked around, and there I was, where I had been when this whole thing started. And I was stone cold sober. There was whatever drug had been in me at the time had been purged from me. Probably I sweated it out. And if you don't think that's possible, you don't know anything about drugs, because I've seen people do it. I wasn't the least bit high when I came back. And I was sort of in shock, not because of the drugs, but because of the experience and because of what I had just seen and heard. But I was physically fine. I mean, absolutely fine. Not sick, definitely not hallucinating. First of all, I wasn't doing any drugs that were hallucinogenic, but and I know what hallucinations are like, and this was not a hallucination. But when I returned, I was stone cold sober and physically fine. And no, I did not go to the hospital. I didn't feel any need to. I was awake, I was conscious, my pulse was normal, my blood pressure was normal, I was fine. Blown away, but I was physically fine. And that was definitely the end of me ever going near any of that stuff again. That's for darn sure. But some people learn easily. Some people, like me, need a 2x4 upside their head. But we take what we take. We get what we get. Subtlety is sort of lost on me. So sometimes I need reality to just go boing and get my attention. But yeah, it was real and it happened. And it changed my life. It absolutely changed the direction of my life. It changed the purpose of my life. It changed the meaning of my life. And it changed me for the better, I hope. So here I am.
When you came back, Brooke, did you notice any heightened sense of hearing, seeing? Did you have any special talents in the days or weeks that came where there was something different about you? You're more in tune with the world or people?
I've always had certain abilities that I didn't understand. From the time I was 2 years old, as a matter of fact, I used to have dreams as a child, and they would come true. And nobody could explain it to me. My parents poo-pooed it. When I was older, I started seeing dream analysts and seeking guidance and trying to understand. But all I know is that I perceive things, and I always have. This is not a function of my near-death experience. I have always had perceptions that exist on a level that most people don't. I know a lot of people talk about this these days, and you can't swing a dead cat without hitting the so-called empath. But I have always been an empath all my life, and way before I even know what the word meant. And it's not something I would wish on anybody. It's not fun. I can't be in a room full of people without being overwhelmed by the energy of the people in the room. It's definitely not a blessing. You say, oh, I'm an empath. I heard some girl tell me a while ago, I'm an animal empath. Now, I can like talk to animals, but I can't feel other people's stuff, but I can feel animal stuff. Okay, fine, whatever. Please don't try and become an empath, because you won't like it. It's painful. I mean, it's really painful. But that's not a function of my near-death experience. It was just something that was a part of me. And then there's this thing about me supposedly not dying when I should have, at least 7 times. That, I mean, truly, there is no explanation for the times that, maybe someday I'll write a whole book about all of them because they're really bizarre. And I don't know other people who have lived lives like this, that are able to feel other people's emotions and are able to know that something ain't right. I mean, big time, something ain't right. And there's a voice somewhere in their head protecting them and saying, get out of here right now. Or, I was almost, if I hadn't gotten out of my chair at 4:31 in the morning on January 17th of 1994, I would have been decapitated. And the only reason I wasn't decapitated was because a voice in my head screamed, get up. And I dove out of my chair because I'm a writer. I was finishing a script for the TV series Frasier. I had just typed the words fade out, the end, and boom, the lights went out. And my desk was in an alcove in my dining room with 2x4s, 6-foot long 2x4s on the left, on the right, and in front of, up to the ceiling with computer towers and boombox and plants and books and everything. I jumped out of my chair and immediately heard this thunderous crash, and boom, the walls started shaking. And it was the Northridge earthquake that started at 4:31 in the morning on the 17th of January, 1994. And my house was knocked off its foundation, and I lost pretty much everything I owned. And when I went back into my house a couple hours later, after the sun had come up, and I walked around the corner and I looked into my office, I puked because, what I saw freaked me out. My high back desk chair had a 2x4 in it, a 6-foot long 2x4, because all of those shelves had collapsed along with everything else I owned. And there was a 6-foot long 2x4 sitting in my high back leather chair at a 45-degree angle. If I had not jumped out of that chair exactly when I did, that first crash I heard was the shelving unit collapsing and that 2x4 slamming into my chair, and it would have cut my head off. Where did that voice come from that told me to get up? Where did that voice come from that got me out of that elevator? And 5 other situations, every bit as bizarre. I can't explain them except to say that I was born with it. I don't understand it, but I finally, took a long time, but I finally got to the point where I accepted the reality and the truth of it. Because I can't not. I mean, there are just too many situations like that that defy any rational explanation. And the only explanation can be, I have an ability to see, hear, or feel things other people don't. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I know, and I have learned, when my gut tells me something, if I don't do what it is telling me, the consequences ain't going to be good. So I now trust my gut. I had one experience as an adult where my gut was telling me something and I ignored it. And it was while I was going through cancer treatment. And after months and months and months of chemo, my doctor, my oncologist said, you have to go through radiation. And I said, well, you had told me originally that I wouldn't need radiation. He said, yeah, well, the cancer was pretty advanced when we found it. And yeah, you need radiation. So I went home and I did what I always do. I researched. I got online and I looked at everything I could find about radiation. I called a friend of mine who's a radiological oncologist. I asked her every question I could think of. I looked everywhere and I could not find a single thing that said radiation is harmful. I couldn't find a single thing that said cancer patients whose oncologists say they need radiation should consider not doing it because blah, 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 blah. I couldn't find anything, but my gut was saying, don't do it. I did it anyway. 5 days into the beginning of my radiation, I started getting violently sick. Projectile vomiting at 5:30 every morning, every single day for 3.5 months. A lawsuit was brought by cancer patients at UC, at Cedars-Sinai in LA, who were being treated with radiation therapy using the same machinery that I was being treated with in Eugene, Oregon. New machinery. Technicians hadn't been properly taught how to use it. And these cancer patients in LA brought a lawsuit. Come to find out, I was being treated with the same machinery and the technicians who were using it didn't know what they were doing. And I was severely over-radiated. It permanently destroyed my immune system. I puked my guts out every day for 3.5 months. I lost 1/3 of my body weight in 6 weeks. I spent the next 2 years puking my guts out at least every other day for 2 years. I have no immune system now. I got down to 98 pounds. I'm 5'8". I looked like an Auschwitz inmate. I'll never be healthy. And now we're in the middle of a worldwide plague. Yeah, well, it's no reason it's no surprise. I have not left my house in 1.5 years, and I don't plan on leaving it anytime soon. And all of you people who are refusing to get a COVID vaccine or refusing to wear a mask, you selfish sons of bitches. Oh, sorry, Melissa. But you're not thinking about everybody else because you could kill me. Sorry, I forgot who I was talking to. Anyway, I should have trusted my gut. It told me don't have radiation. I did, and I will never be okay. That's the last time I ever refused to listen to my gut, and I'll never do it again. And yeah, I have this ability. I don't know where it came from, but it wasn't from my near-death experience. I was born with it. And now I let it guide me because I trust it. Sorry about that. You can edit that out. I'm sorry. I forgot.
Don't apologize. You have to say whatever you want to say. This is your time.
Sorry. Okay, any more questions?
That was my question, which you answered. I was going to say, could you tell us another story? And you did that. You told us about the earthquake, but you actually, and then you told us about your gut instinct medically. And it's a good lesson for all of us to listen to that inner voice, which I'm not good at. So I really appreciate that lesson because I doubt it. I think, I don't know, am I making this up? I don't know. Where's this coming from? And yours is very loud and clear. Not all of us have this loud and clear voice. And If there's anything else you want to say, let us know. But that was going to be my question. Can you tell us another story? I'd like to know if one day when you're ready, let me know if you want to share the other 4 or 5 stories, because that just sounds fascinating. So, or any topic, if you want to do a part 2, I would love that. And if there's anything else you want to say, let us know.
Okay, I know where to find you. Absolutely. And I share that story about the elevator literally at my own peril. And I shouldn't, but it's important to my story. But the reason I shouldn't is because I have very severe post-traumatic stress disorder. Not surprising. And of all of the experiences that I've been through, and there have been at least 7, that one is a bad trigger for me. I know I won't sleep tonight because I told that story. But I think it's important. I might have to find a way to work this sort of story around without including that story, because that's a bad one. But yeah, and for people who know that their gut tells them something and they don't trust it, just keep in mind that what your head tells you is filtered in with things that your mama taught you, your teachers taught you, your friends say, your television says, the magazines say, the internet says. What your gut tells you is immune to all that noise. What your gut tells you is in a vibration that is in harmony with the basic laws of the universe. If your gut is telling you something and it doesn't feel like, it's just sort of saying that. If it's saying it and repeating it and it is not letting you ignore it, don't ignore it, trust it. Because your gut cannot be wrong. It can't be, because it has nothing to do with anybody else's opinion. It has nothing to do with your own opinion. Your gut is literally part of the energy that is connecting you to the universe. It can't be wrong. You just have to learn how to hear it and learn what it's saying, and then learn to trust it. There you go.
Beautiful, Brooke. Thank you. This was so wonderful. So many people are going to learn so much, and you're going to touch a lot of people. Thank you. And I know you already have.
Well, thank you. And I'm absolutely serious. Anybody who wants to ask me another question or just contact me and tell me how my book affected them or tell me their own experiences, just go to writtenbybrookejones.com to the bottom of the page where there's a contact form and send me an email.
Well, I appreciate that you wrote it in a book. I appreciate it that you do interviews, because I know a good number of people, they don't want to share. And I think, like you said, it was meant to be for you to share this and for you to go through these things, because so many of us haven't had that experience, and we're benefiting from you, from your book, from your story. So I appreciate it very much that you're open and willing to share.
Thank you. And there have been a lot of people who have said, well, even a reviewer of my book several months ago said, well, I don't know, it sounds real, but I'm kind of questioning it. Why did it take her so long to write about it if it was real? Well, if you know the story of near-death experiencers, you will find that it is common that we don't talk about it for a very long time afterwards. It is extremely uncommon for a near-death experiencer to talk about it immediately thereafter. The most common behavior is, first of all, for the person who has had the experience to take time to integrate the experience with their life, with their own feelings and beliefs, and then come to terms with it, and then figure out who to tell, because nobody likes being thought of as a lunatic. And the world still has a hard time with the whole concept of near-death experiences. And as you just said earlier, oh, well, it's a hallucination, it was a this, it was that, because that's what people are prone to think. And therefore, a lot of people say, I'm not telling anybody about this because I really don't need people thinking I'm any wackier than they already think I am. But in fact, the vast majority of people who have had a near-death experience wait many, many years before they share it. And by the way, I don't like the term near-death experience. Raymond Moody, the father of the near-death experience, Dr. Raymond Moody, who first wrote the first book about it back in the 70s, coined the phrase near-death experience, and his people are now putting my book on his website, and thank you very much for that. But I don't like the term near-death experience, because when you're having one, honey, you're not near death. You are all the way flat out dead. So it shouldn't be a NDE, near-death experience. It should be ADE, a death experience, because you ain't near it, baby. You's all the way there. But, you know, that's what they call it. And that's why people don't talk about it for a very long time, because the vast majority of the people on this planet don't believe it. And nobody wants to be thought of as a lunatic. Nobody wants to be put away in a rubber room. But it is now becoming accepted science. Dr. Eben Alexander, who's a neurosurgeon, wrote a book about it, and it's fascinating because he had an experience. And if you haven't read Eben's book, you definitely should. It's called Proof of Heaven, and it'll blow your mind. And there are now online internet groups of people supporting near-death experiences literally all around the world. There's one in Seattle, and in Texas, and in New Jersey, and in Chicago, and in the Philippines. And I just heard from a woman who runs the Seattle chapter of IONS, the international group that studies near-death experience, that there is now a chapter in Iran and Israel. And those two groups in countries that hate each other, the people in the Iranian group and the people in the Israeli group, are now talking to each other. Hello. Maybe the way that this world is going to get fixed is by listening to the people who have been to the other side and have come back. I don't care what it takes. I just want to get us there. So when I heard that that Iranian group and that Israeli group were actually now connecting and sharing, I thought, okay, there's hope. There's hope for this world. I've taken up enough of your time.
Love it. I could talk to you for another hour or two. And it's a good time for me to remind people too, to hit subscribe, because that's how you help channels like this to one day monetize and keep these stories going. So thank you. If you could hit that subscribe button, it's very, very helpful. And maybe even the like button.
There you go.
Thanks, Brooke. Anything else you wanted to comment on or share?
I'm good for now, but yeah, let's keep in touch and let me know how you're doing. And thank you very much for giving me this time and this opportunity. And if you have any other questions, you know how to reach me.
Thanks, Brooke. And thanks everyone for listening. It was so fun. Thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Be well and stay safe.